It is fair for the government to means test the winter fuel allowance. I think there is a strong argument for getting rid of the universality of the payment. Certainly multimillionaires don't need it. My criticism since the first moment I heard about it is that the eligibility criteria for that means testing is far too narrow.
Well, let's hear now from money-saving expert Martin Lewis. He's on the line. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hiya.
Let's look at this price cap first of all. So the average annual energy bill now increasing to over £1,700 a year for gas and electricity. How tough will that increase be for people in your view?
Well, if you forgive me, I hate the fact Ofgem uses the typical use figure because I think it's meaningless for most people. So I'll explain it in the way I think works best. For every £100 you spend on energy right now, on average, you'll be paying £110 from the 1st of October. That's the most important thing. And if we want to go more nuanced, we're seeing the standing charges because the price cap is a cap on the amount that energy providers can charge on their standard tariffs. It caps the standing charge and the unit rate. Over 80% of homes in England, Scotland and Wales are on the price cap tariff right now. If you're not sure, you almost certainly are on a price cap tariff. You're not on a fixed, you're not on a special tariff. So in which case, the standing charges are only going up by around 1%. It's the unit charges that are going up by more. For electricity, it's going up 9.6% on average. It is regional variance. And for gas, it's going up 14%. So if you're a high user with gas, you'll actually probably see for each 100 quid you pay now, you'll probably be paying 112, 113 pounds from October. And if you're a lower user without gas, then it might be 107, 108 pounds, but it's going up. And then the real news people need to understand is based on current predictions, because the whole system works on a time lag. We are expecting a likely small rise in January or no change in January. And even by this point next year, we are expecting people to still be paying more for energy than they are right now. So overall, energy bills are going up. And if I can do a bit of my sort of day job rather than the political stuff, put my money saving expert hat on, if you look today at the cheapest fixes on the market where you can lock in a rate for a year, those fixes are a few percent more expensive than the current price cap, but 7% cheaper than the October price cap where we think it's going to stay at. So if the predictions are right, you can lock in a fix right now and probably save yourself about 7% over the next year and forestall those rises. And what I don't know is whether they'll still be around in October when the price actually goes up. So a safe thing to do is to go and look on a whole of market comparison site right now for the cheapest fix for your usage and location.
Right. Well, that's excellent advice. And, hence my quip at the beginning that, death and taxes are certainties, but now higher energy bills appear to be certainties as well, based on what you've been saying. So taking all of that into account, given the constrained public finances, is it fair for the government to means test the winter fuel allowance, given they've got to find the money from somewhere, or is that going to exacerbate this problem of higher energy bills, particularly for the elderly?
It is fair for the government to means test the winter fuel allowance. I think there is a strong argument for getting rid of the universality of the payment. Certainly multimillionaires don't need it. My criticism since the first moment I heard about it is that the eligibility criteria for that means testing is far too narrow. If you allow me to take you through some maths on this, I think will be educative for people. So if we look, and we'll use the horrible Ofgem typical use. If we look at a typical use household from October to March, actually it's worth understanding that energy costs this year are less than last year because they've already come down even though they're going back up again. And last year was defined as a crisis year. So a typical household on typical use will be paying £100 less between October and March. There's quite a few assumptions in there, but that scale of magnitude than they were last year. But first of all, last year, like the year before, there was a cost of living payment made of around £300 to pensioner households to help. That's already gone before we talk about the winter fuel payment. So £100 cheaper, but you've lost 300 quid. So that's £200 net down on average. Then you've got the winter fuel payment, a universal, I should say up to £300 that payment was, a universal payment again of another up to £300. Well, the vast majority of pensioner households will lose that. Only those claiming pension credit, which let's be plain, is the very lowest income pensioners, those earning less than £11,300 a year, roughly. I mean, there's quite a lot of nuance in it, but roughly less than £11,300 a year will get help. And then they have to claim it and there are 880,000 homes not claiming it who are eligible. And I've been shouting about it for years, and we've not managed to break through. So I don't see there being that much change in the number claiming it. We might get it down to only 800,000 missing out, but not many more. So that to me means we're only helping a limited number of people on the very lowest incomes. Now, a pensioner household on, say, £12,000 a year, when it's already lost the £300 cost of living support, it's only gaining £100 because of the cost reduction. And now it's just lost the winter fuel support. That isn't enough, and they're going to be hurting. Now, the suggestion that I will be making to the Chancellor, because people have to understand the real problem here is that the winter fuel payment is a household payment. And because it's a household payment and we don't have household data, it's always been very difficult to be able to target people, which why pension credit was a simple option. But there is another option, and there's precedent for it. In March, 2022, when energy support was put in place, which I was involved in lobbying for, one payment that was made was a payment to people on council tax bands A to D. Now, that is not a bad proxy for the lower half of earners. It's an imperfect proxy. I absolutely accept that, but it is a workable way to do this. So my suggestion when I meet the Chancellor, and I've already written this, is I would say that you make the winter fuel payment to everybody who gets pension credit and all pensioners in council tax bands A to D, or you might decide council tax bands A to C. And that would be a far better proxy for some of the lower income households. And then I would do a small slush fund distributed by local councils to the few people who are in higher bands who need the help that could be applied for. And if you did something like that, then I think you might be able to relatively quickly, relatively easily, at relatively low administrative cost, both get rid of the universality of winter fuel payment, but help many more people who need it.
Is there an argument for cutting back winter fuel allowance more broadly along the lines that the government suggested, given that pensioners have had it easier than working age households in recent years financially? I mean, there's a lot of figures there's a Resolution Foundation report in June, for example, talking about non-pensioners being on average £760 better off in this year than in 2010, but pensioners are £1,000 better off. And when you look at households with children, they're on average £780 worse off this year than in 2010.
There's an argument for helping all people. We have energy bills that are getting on for nearly double what they were pre-crisis, and people's real incomes have nowhere near been able to cover that. But what we're doing here is we're taking something away. There's an argument that you should add it elsewhere too, but we're taking something away. So on the budgeting, now, many pensioners lack any form of ability to change the number of hours they work. Not that I'm advocating that's a solution for everything by any way, in the way that working people do. And pensioners are generally more vulnerable to the cold weather than the rest of the population. So when we are talking that there will be many pensioners who are either not claiming pension credit or just above the threshold when they get it, who will practically be unable to afford to put the heating on when it's needed, I think that is of serious concern.
Do you think the Chancellor will back down then? I mean, a lot of Labour MPs are seriously worried behind the scenes.
Look, there's a reason that I'm offering a solution which I think is a relatively easy way out, which is you get rid of universality, but you give winter fuel payment to a few more people. I think there is a real and plausible chance of that change coming in the budget. And one of the reasons I think that, when I was given a briefing on this, I have to be slightly careful what I say. When I was given a briefing on this, when the announcement was made, one of the things I was told is that the Department for Work and Pensions would be looking and making sure that it all worked and it all worked fairly. And that was even before there was any fuss about it, because the briefing I had was very early. And I immediately said that your eligibility criteria is too narrow. That was my first response within the moment I was told it. And so I think that there is perhaps some wriggle room for an argument that we've looked at the impact stats on this and there are other routes. And I think that what has to happen is, one way or other, they have to broaden the eligibility. They don't need to go back to giving everybody winter fuel payment. There's no need for that. There are many people who are affluent who give away their winter fuel payment. Well, let's stop giving it to them. But let's just make sure that many of the poorest and most vulnerable in society who really need that winter fuel payment are getting it.
Right.
And not saying use my council tax system. That is just me putting out there something that's imperfect but workable and could be quick. There may well be other methods, but I think they probably do need to find something. And
right.
I'd say it's 50-50 whether this will be changed in the budget.
Martin Lewis, thank you
Thanks a
very
lot.
much for joining us. Money saving expert Martin Lewis there.